In this video, we're going to talk about some key terms. We're going to talk about intercepts, zeros, and roots. All right, let's get right into our definitions. These definitions are the most important thing in this video. Right? You really have to think about what these words mean in order to do the problems in our practice. All right, so let's start with intercepts. When we talk about intercepts, there are basically two types. There are y-intercepts and x-intercepts. You're probably familiar with these already. All right, let's define these. The y-intercept of a graph, of a function, is the point at which the function intersects the y-axis. Right? It's the point at which the function intersects the y-axis. All right, so then what's an x-intercept? Right? X-intercepts, those are the places on a graph, or I should say the point, or points, at which the function intersects the x-axis. Right? And like I said, you probably are familiar with those two. Right? Y-intercept, that's where the function intersects the y-axis. X-intercepts, that's where the function intersects the x-axis. All right, those aren't too hard. This next one's probably new for you. The zeros of a function, right? Those are the input values that produce an output value of 0. Right? That's why it's called zeros. Okay. So another way of saying this is that we know the output is going to be 0, and you have to figure out what input values would get you that output value of 0. In other words, you're looking for the zeros of the function are the x values that make your f of x equal to 0. Right? Let me say that again. Right? We're looking for the x values that will make f of x be equal to 0. Or in other words, the x values that make this output equal to 0. Right? What are the inputs that give us an output of 0? Right? These zeros, they're also called the roots. Okay? I don't really like that term, but some math textbooks use that term. Okay? So the roots of a function, that's pretty much the same as the zeros of the function. Right? Those are the values that make the output 0. All right, so let's look at some examples. To really understand this, you got to see how this works. All right, so we have this function that's graphed here, and we're going to find the x and y intercepts, and we're also going to identify the zeros of the function. All right, so let's start by identifying our x-intercepts. All right, so that's where the function intersects the x-axis, right? Well, here's our x-axis. X-axis is this horizontal line. Where does the function intersect the x-axis? Well, right here and right here. All right, so what are those points? This point is the point 2, 0, and the other intercept is right here at -3, 0. Right? Those are the x-intercepts. That's pretty easy. All right, we also want to identify the y-intercept. Okay, let's see, what's the y-intercept? Well, that's the point where the function intersects the y-axis. Right? This is my y-axis. Where does it intersect? Right here. So my y-intercept is that point. That point is 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6. Okay. So the x-intercepts are these 2 points, 2, 0, and -3, 0. The y-intercept is 0, -6. All right, one thing to notice, actually, I'll save that to the end. All right, let's move on. Last thing, let's identify the zeros of the function. Okay. All right, this one's the new one. All right, let's go back to the definition. The zeros are the input values that give us an output value of 0. Right, well, let's think about this. Where in this graph do I have output values of 0? Right, and remember, the output values, those are your y values. Right, and you probably noticed that the output values, when the output values are 0, that would be right here and right here. Right? And in those points, this was 2, 0, this was negative 3, 0. Those were our x-intercepts. Right? So the zeros, again, are the input values that give us an output of 0. Right? So the first 0 would be 2. Right? It sounds kind of funny to say that 2 is a 0. Right? But 2 is an output value that gives us 0. Right? If we were dealing with f of x, if that was the name of this function, right, that would mean that f of 2 would give us an output of 0. Okay? All right, so this is our first 0. The second 0 was negative 3. Right? And the reason is because when the input is negative 3, we get an output of 0. Right? And you can see that right here. This point, negative 3, 0. Input is negative 3, output is 0. Okay, so those are our two zeros. All right, I want you to do number 2. Okay, so please pause and again find the x-intercepts, find the y-intercepts, and find the zeros. Pause please and do that. Okay, here's your answers. X-intercepts, where does it cross the x-axis? Right, well that's right here, and right here. So those points, that would be negative 1, 0, 1, 0, and 1, 2, 3, 0. What's the y-intercept? Where does it intersect the y-axis? Right here. That's 0, 1, 2, 3. Right? And lastly, what are the zeros? Right? What are the x values that give us a y value or an output value of 0? That should be negative 1, positive 1, and 3.